This week, we're bringing you a special episode filled with some of our most memorable highlights from our conversations with several industry experts. Get ready for a journey through some of the most insightful and pressing industrial cybersecurity topics and conversations. Over the past year, we've had the privilege of speaking with leading authorities on industrial cybersecurity, from asset owners and operators to cybersecurity researchers and the world's leading cybersecurity solution providers across every industry. You'll hear their perspectives on the evolving threat landscape, risks to be aware of, best practices for protecting industrial manufacturing and critical infrastructure environments, and the innovative technologies and solutions shaping the future of this dynamic field. We've got a lot of interesting ground to cover.
Hey, I'm Dino Busalaki, the Chief Technology Officer and OT guy at Velta Technology.
Hi, I'm Jim, the COO and IT guy.
And I'm Craig Duckworth, President and CEO.
You're listening to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider Show.
In each episode, we bring you the inside scoop on the world of industrial cybersecurity.
We talk about everything you don't know
that you should know. So plug in and power up. The show's about to get started.
So again, back to that Dell IT perception problem. Dell has a lot of professional services on the IT side around cybersecurity. They have MDR functionality or services. They have what's called data protection, where they do something called cyber vaulting, where they actually separate and copy the data so that you could do disaster recovery. In the past, they've not had a good strategy around OT. As they were building out these subject matter expert teams like my team, one of the things I think that they did really is they created what's called Dell validated designs for manufacturing. So now not only is it around hardware platforms, it's around hardware and software platforms. So in industrial cybersecurity, for example, what Dell has done is they have a strategic partnership with Coady. They have a strategic partnership with Nozomi. And they actually have validated designs around that software platform sitting on Dell's hardware infrastructure. And what that does is it allows the client now to start from scratch, right? Because that's the biggest problem is, first of all, how do I start? Do I start from scratch? With these validated designs around industrial cyber that Dell has now, it helps get that acceleration to time to value, de-risk. They get a 200-page design guide so that someone, if they chose Coady, for example, on Dell hardware, it's very easy for them to go ahead, oh, perfect. That's how I can get started to get a platform in.
Yeah. I've always been a fan of the validated design, as IT would be, right? Mainly because of standardization and support, right? Validated design means support. A lot of our peers on the OT side will forego their maintenance and support after a period of time, right? Because the OT assets are out there for decades. And so if a few years, everything seems to be going fine, they tend to let that stuff slide off the table. But they would never do that with safety, which is something that, again, validated design, but also coming in and saying, hey, you need to have a really good physical safety measure around this robot so somebody doesn't get hurt. How do you get these two worlds to own up to that? I'm in the camp that I think OT needs to start taking a bigger role in ownership of not only just cybersecurity, because there's a lot of process integrity events that you can get out of this to help improve operational efficiency, operational safety, and things of that nature. As you see these validated designs, you think there's a way that we could leverage that in the OT space so they don't let things slide off the table after several years and give up on support and maintenance.
And that's where I'm in complete agreement with you that, to me, it shouldn't be an industrial cyber conversation. It should be a digital safety conversation. It changes everything. Safety is everyone's responsibility. It's on everyone's end.
That's the term you coined, that whole digital safety.
Yeah, and I think that's a great... The other reason I find digital safety to be so important is it's not just around cyber, around connected assets. You hit on something that I think we forget a lot about, and that is data integrity. How do I make sure that data is not changing in flight, right? Mm-hmm. If we start talking about Dell's strategy right now around AI and Gen AI and all those things, it's all around the data. Who's verifying the data? You can leverage these types of tools, not just around industrial asset visibility and who's talking to who and what's being said, but you can actually make sure that data is not changing in flight as part of your data verification strategy to feed into things like analytic tools and Gen AI and everything else.
Well, yeah, even on the OT cybersecurity front, one of the things we've witnessed that a lot of the plant teams like is something as simple as an online edit on a PLC that somebody can do, can be completely warranted, but there's no tracking mechanism for that, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. And so these OT cybersecurity tools, again, process integrity, when it comes to a PLC change, that is something that interests the OT guys, not so much an IT person, right? To them, it's what's a PLC change anyway, right? But now that you can bring that to the table is something that I think that OT people want to have. At least that's what they tell us, right? When you tell them that, hey, you can track a PLC change, yeah, we can track your PLC changes with these tool sets, which is good for them because it doesn't matter what control system you have. And when you get to the validated designs, now you get these tools out there, the sensor-ready panels that we talked about using the Dell technology, that when you're building a new packaging line,
right,
you're putting tools in there. Maybe you can describe how Dell got into that game, which I think is really key in being able to get that visibility deeper and broader into that digital transformation, right? Digital transformation is about the data, right? Absolutely. And there's a lot of data down in that panel circulating around down there that people aren't really sure what it's all doing.
And I want to circle back a little bit to what you said, again, around the data. If you think about it, an IT person may not care if someone makes a change to something on the IT network. If you can show how you prevented downtime, quality issues that cost big dollars on the OT side by leveraging a tool like this, these are the things that, even in my opinion, the industrial cyber platform salespeople don't even talk about because they're so focused on the industrial cyber side. But again, it's how do we make sure that we've had conversations where, hey, clients have had a patch pushed down from IT down to OT, and all of a sudden it wipes some things in the PLC, and the OT guys just go, oh, just drop it up to a ghost in the machine, and they're down for 30 hours. Having a platform in place like this that gives that visibility is critical, because now instead of a 30-hour downtime, maybe it's a 5-minute downtime, and it could be millions of dollars for some of these OT people. So again, that digital safety, to me, it's so critical around that aspect.
What we witness is there's a lot of folks that don't even realize what they have in their environment, right? I mean, if you look at any of the security frameworks, the number one tenet is asset inventories, identification. What do you got? And even though visually they can see that they have this equipment on the plant floor, they don't know what's underneath the hood, and they don't know how it's connected into the environment. Whether it's, we find cellular modems in these things, we find Wi-Fi in these things, we find it connected to the plant network, but nobody can see it because they don't have the right tools in place to surface it up. And we'll hear executives on the IT say those machines aren't connected. We'll hear people in the plant say, no, those machines aren't connected. But what'd you do during COVID? COVID kicked this door wide open. People couldn't travel. You couldn't get on site. We're going to let your plant just shut down, because you're having problems with your machine. No, you provided remote access into that space, and it is still there. And when we uncover it, for a lot of them, it's like, and we show it every single time. It's been a challenge.
Can I ask you and your audience a question? Most of these are manufacturers in your world, predominantly manufacturer or in that pipeline supply chain. When they start talking inventory, every December, they bring in a company that comes in and inventories their stock for tax purposes. They inventory, they catalog it, they actually process it as part of generally accepted accounting principles to do so. How is this any different? Wouldn't that same logic be applied that on a given date, you have to do this, inventory and put the report in? Because here's what's going to happen, and we've talked about this. Once this inventory happens and something triggers it, I'm going to leave OEMX, we all know who they are, and they've got that great PLC on the box, and it's coded 15112, but those boxes are 40,000 places across the globe, but the one in Cincinnati gets hit. But the guy in Tucson hasn't been hit, but the operative ordered it yet. But he goes to his inventory and says, oh my God, we just got a public notification that an OEM bottler in Cincinnati got hit. Now, we don't want the bottlers getting hit because other people make our beers. When we hang out the next time there, we want to make sure it's on the table. But I'm kind of making a light joke of this because what's going to happen by inventory, you get an early warning system, and that is very plausible. There's a great technology out there to do this. It's called Google Earth. I know a few people I can call that do work in the GIS field, and this can be done. No one is paying attention to the reporting side of it, and that is pre-reporting. Inventorying is so important for reporting.
But it's like they operate in two dimensions between IT and OT. They're not in the same dimension. And we see that because when you really put a spotlight on your manufacturing environment, most IT organizations don't want to own that. Even when we talk about what it takes to secure that, I've heard these questions. It's like, if you're exercising the same amount of due diligence to secure and protect your enterprise, why aren't you applying that to the plant floor? The same amount of due diligence. But the response I get is, well, do you know how much that's going to cost? And it's like, yeah, I got a pretty good idea what it's going to cost.
That's where I was going. So I knew the cost was coming, and that's why I asked you to stop. So, okay, why did they connect these things? It wasn't a function of IT or IT. It was a function of accounting, reporting. So the very
transformation, right?
Right. Well, they're not mapping their risk from the generally accepted accounting principles side. But they can't go around and say, hey, I don't understand this IT OT stuff. And I'm going to sit in the room and say, really, Mr. CFO? Are you sure? Do you inventory the inventory that's out there on the floor right now? And you do it every day? Please explain to me how that is any different from when someone else comes in and inventories your risk. It's the exact same thing, Dino. What happens is there's the community. This is not a community, I got you. That's where everybody needs to stop. You're already doing this. Let us show you how to apply it over here. And that is where it has to go. And then your insurance companies, me, are going to go, you're going to look really good. By the way, that's going to affect your pricing not only on cyber, but on everything. Everything. And it's coming. Probably saw my post on workers' compensation. OSHA losses started to come into play.
The ones that have been hit, right? The ones that make the news. A lot of people say, well, they all started in IT, began in IT, but yeah, it made its way to your plant floor. And the reason why you had to shut down Clorox, Colonial Pipeline, take your pick of those that had to shut down in abundance of safety, because they didn't have any visibility of how this hack, how far it had gotten within their organization. They didn't know if the control systems, it may not be a PLC hit, but there's Windows operating systems controlling those PLCs. And the hack was on Windows. So you're getting hacked over here on the right on the IT side, Windows. It's also made its way to your plant floor. It's Windows. And so they have to shut down to go through and clean and scrub to see if they remove any malware that may have made its way down in there, because they can't sit there and unequivocally say, I can operate because I don't have the same problem going over there in IT, so I can keep running the plant.
I'm going to bring it back to one of your original questions because you just hit on it. They went to the product. You said it was Microsoft in this case. So everybody's so concerned, can I get coverage? In some cases, you don't need coverage of your own. You have coverage of common law. If someone causes a loss to you, a third party, I always use the term digital pinto, you have the right for recourse. These CEOs in the aggregate, these people, the CFOs, the risk managers, are not using the common law leverage that they have, which is a form of insurance, okay? That's what it is, transference of risk to the laws. They are not using their rights of recovery, which is what we are teaching them how to do. Plaintiffs' attorneys are not all ambulance chasers. Many of them are advocates, okay? And some of them are quite good. The defense attorneys are starting to realize that this stuff is coming down, and because of these concurrent causalities that they know about, they've done nothing to mitigate, is where all these problems are going to come back to haunt them. Those are very, very important things. People need to relook at what insurance actually is. Stop looking as a policy, a paper that comes from the usual customers. Question everything. And I'm questioning everything. We've got cases of cyber cases are getting denied, and we're helping customers get it denied because they don't understand the construct of the policies. That's what we do. Just like people in the manufacturing world don't understand that the mapment of every little gray box that's along that way on the beer line, or it's a paper line or whatever. What does it do, right, Dino?
Right. I mean, that's, again, our strategy, what we do is OT specific intrusion detection system cybersecurity. That's what we do. And that's going out there and mapping out all the interactivity going on within that environment, asset inventory, showing you what your vulnerabilities are, doing threat hunting, tracking down all your remote access in and out of this environment, stuff that you may be aware of, stuff that you're unaware of. That's our focus. It's how you can get better. How can you improve your cybersecurity posture, reduce your attack surface? And that's the game we play every day.
I think that for us, there's the market as a whole in the industrial space. It's really becoming more top of mind for boards, for C-suite. And we touched on this a little bit ago. As organizations are beginning to move that direction, we are seeing more board members sitting on cross companies, taking notice of different things and really trying to drive that narrative down. One of the thoughts is, does it make sense to start at the C level, meaning a CIO or a CISO, and try and bring adoption and bring awareness? Or do you go back to your native roots and you start working with the controls engineers and you start driving the narrative from the bottom up. We hear a lot about asset ownership. It's not going to work if we don't have buy-in from the asset owners. IT can only drive this so far down. What are you guys seeing, and where are you finding successes that other organizations may be able to say, maybe we should look at an approach that way?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about that problem because I lead a sales organization and a business development organization. So we try to find what has the most efficacy in terms of how do we get our customers to recognize the problem and solve it. Unfortunately, our learnings of the last couple of years have been we kind of have to talk to the IT and the OT side of the house to try to bring them together. It's not universally true, Craig. I like the idea of calling high and have it pushed down, but all too often, even industrial type companies, the CISO, the CIO, they really don't understand the pain of the plant operator.
That's a true statement. Yep.
So it, of course, varies by company, but I would say where we've had the most success is by trying to bring those parties together and address them as different personas. We have become somewhat proficient at pivoting the conversation to the unique needs of each of those stakeholders because they are very different. So we haven't found an easy way, Craig. If you can show me an easier way to get to the person that is the stakeholder for the problem, I'd love to learn from you. Right now, we're kind of having to toggle between IT and IT.
We're seeing the same thing. We are trying to identify that persona, but I would agree with you 1,000%. Every project that we've done that has been the most successful has been when IT and OT work together to come and try and solve the problem jointly as an organization, not a this is your problem or this is your problem. And they're sitting there going back and forth with each other and nobody is fixing the problem.
I agree with that too, Craig. A little footnote to my answer that this is a minor thing the audience might appreciate. I do feel like as we see these deployments getting adoption in the marketplace, it's becoming very evident that the IT folks kind of have to own the oversight of it. The tools, the SIM, the SOC, the alerting, that skill base, that infrastructure, that mindset is very conducive to a IT security professional. Once you convince the plant folks that you're not going to impair their operation. So the IT, to me, has an ownership and reporting and management oversight role that is becoming pretty pronounced in my mind. And the OT folks will take that help all day long.
And they will, because their skill sets are different. The OT teams, the controls engineers, sometimes they're called maintenance guys, are not skilled in the technical aspect of some of these tools and technologies that you guys are providing and other vendors are providing, but they understand the assets. We don't see IT teams being tasked with remediating a PLC. They're not going to come down to that level. But the tools that we're talking about that work in the environment, they understand technology sometimes better than the OT teams do and can kind of bridge that gap some. So, great footnote.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Are you guys seeing more global adoption? Or are you guys seeing prevalent market share more in the US? Where would you say, taking aside, and maybe taking aside is not it, maybe including the geopolitical landscape of today, given the events that have unfolded in the last 2 weeks, are you seeing more adoption EMEA, Middle East, US, Asia Pacific? From a global standpoint, what are you seeing the landscape look like?
Yeah, I'm probably a little biased in my answer to the question just based on who I work for. Our technology was invented for a very, very large chip manufacturer that was trying to recover from massive fab shutdowns half a decade ago. So our adoption base, the TXOne adoption base, has moved from Asia to the West. Now, but globally, taking off my TXOne data set, I'll say it's less geographically oriented and maybe more industry vertical driven. I see semiconductor, in part because of the story I just told you, but I think semiconductor, because they have their own water treatment plants, they have their own refinery operations, they have their own power generation system. So they check all the boxes of what we call the CISA critical industries in one industry vertical. And the semiconductor manufacturers have pushed this down into their supply chain because the supply chain is very fragile and it's distributed all around the world. Behind that, automotive has been a huge adopter. I think just broadly, again, not just TXOne, I think automotive and automotive suppliers, again, because of supply chain, big pharma.
Okay.
Oil and gas. So not the answer you're probably expecting, but I think it's a vertical maturity thing more than a geographic location thing.
You look back at the critical infrastructure, water, wastewater, you look at power distribution, power generation, that are really being driven from a how do we protect the homeland? And you hear all the time the geopolitical landscape of protect the power grid, protect the water infrastructure. Those are really key areas as well as we go into this, I would almost call it old, new, uncharted landscaping as we are trying to figure out the new norm. We look back 3 years ago, I guess at this point with COVID and how it affected remote access. Organizations got up one morning and their entire work staff was working from home. Well, we as an organization, we as an industry were forced to deal with that. And it was difficult at best from an industrial aspect. How do you have individuals that are responsible for making all the goods we need work from home? It doesn't work that way.
Hey, not another footnote. I'd like to get your reaction. I know you're interviewing me, but I have a question for you.
Sure.
You highlighted, I did not touch on water utilities, water treatment, electric utilities. And that's not because they're not important. I actually have a great deal of empathy for the rural water authority or the co-op utility provider. They're getting a lot of guidance. You know, they get the TSA directive, you've got NERC-CIP, but they're so fragmented. They don't have the budget. They want to do something, and it's very difficult for them to do it. So I don't know if you see it that way, but there's a strong need there. This is a fragile element of our economy, but they really struggle with how do you go and talk to a Velta or TXOne and get their problem fixed. They don't have the budget.
And I would say you're correct. We work with power distribution generation as well as fresh and wastewater for municipalities to county across the country. So it is a challenge. Some of them, there have been grant money. There's been federal money from CISA, from DHS, from the TSA that have been available to them that they can use to strengthen their cyber posture. That has helped. Again, they rely on the taxpayer dollars for their budget. And those are traditionally, let's say they want to do an increase. They may do an increase for the next 3 years or 5 years or whatever that is. And then those funds have to be generated before I think they can use them. So the process is not as simple as what we would call traditional commercial transactions, where you have an organization, either private or public. They have a process that they go through every, let's say, September, October. They create a budget. You have a CFO that says, yep, we like that budget. Here's your money to spend. January 1, they get a checkbook. January the 2nd, they spend all their money, and then they go the rest of the year trying to implement the projects. It doesn't quite work that way from a public sector, but some of the vendors are trying to help them navigate those areas because they recognize the fragile nature of our industrial environment from a critical infrastructure. They see what happened in Texas a couple of years ago when the power plant went off in the dead of winter and people froze to death. It's a horrible, bad situation. You look at that and you're like, we have to do better from an economy and a country to help protect that. So I wish that there were other plans and programs available because it's not as easy and clean as it should be.
Yeah. No.
So
again, I agree with you. Absolutely.
Part of one of the programs that we work with when we're working with a client, and let's say they're an Armis client, for example, most manufacturers always have some level of activity going in to their manufacturing facility, some capital project, meaning that there's some expansion, some life cycle replacement, maybe some new products that they're trying to bring in. We're working with these OEMs, if you will, on trying to make their panels sensor ready. And what we mean by that is, look, this client's already an Armis shop. I just had this conversation with a very large adult beverage manufacturer here in St. Louis. You know who that is. And I'm talking to the team that runs the SOC. And so they're very familiar with the OT IDS platforms that they're using, but they're not deploying any sensors. So to me, this is a natural conversation. If you're bringing a new machine center and you're already an Armis shop, why aren't you putting in for the east-west traffic you mentioned a while ago, let's get that sensor in now. So when you think about your partners, and we are one of them, and we're proud to be an Armis partner, what are you looking for in your partner community these days? And how do you see them help driving this business and improving these cybersecurity postures for your clients, right? What's unique that you're looking for in those guys?
Sitting on the software side of the world now, I'm where I live in the technological part of where I'm supposed to be providing good technology to you and to our clients. It's slightly different from what I've done for almost 2/3 of my career, which was what you've been doing, right? Which is consulting. I think from a partnership perspective, one of the things that we'll see probably on the front end with our technology is the early adoption and then almost, I won't say a near stopping, but not continuing to evolve, mature, and with the adoption, right? And I mean, literally live and breathe it every day, where the console almost is a daily point of contact as a human being on what you're doing. And that could go to the chief security officer, right? I mean, we have the dashboards for them that are basically ready. But from a collaborative perspective, the part that we don't do, other than we present the technology, we solve the problem of giving them better visibility, right? There's definitely visibility. We do vulnerability management now on top of it with the Viper product. You guys have got to help us start setting the strategy and getting in ahead of us that goes, okay, where are you going on your journey? Why are you looking at this? Would you respect, and I can say this even though I'm over here, the technology is not the only part, right? And in certain cases, technology historically, from other engagements I would have done at PwC or other places, the technology in certain cases may cause more problems, not actually fix anything. But I think it's the process of the communication that you would refer to when you're getting in deep with the chief security officer, getting in there being the executive advisor and helping them set a strategy for rolling out the technology. And then as you consume it, then how do you amalgamate it, right? And then what's your ongoing strategy to continuously use it and evolve? One of the things that happens with us, and it happens with our competitors too. I know Clarity were all in the OT lab that I used to have. But I think the back end of that is the constant layering of what you're going to do. We're like a Swiss Army knife, but with a 128 blade Swiss Army knife, which I always go back to. I need Velta and my partners to come back and go, okay, I want you to do these 4 things. These are the first 4 parts of the 128 blade Swiss Army knife. I want you to go execute on, right? Then you're going to add 4 more and you keep going. And by the way, it's not just the use cases. You're also adding site by site. That customer that we're involved with, that's a good example. They've got thousands of sites across the globe.
And no two are the same. No two sites
exactly.
are the same.
The adoption and the consumption of how you get that data into a recognizable format, that it's constantly used, that it's constantly of relevance of what they're doing to manage their overall exposure. That's an adoption thing that what we do, we lay the technology in how we operate, right? We have customer success, technical account managers for someone of that size that dedicated almost for an entire year. But through that process, we're focused on the technology of what you need to consume from a use case perspective. The other part is, where does that lay into the overall strategy for cyber? Where does that lay into the OT cyber strategy and what you're trying to solve for? And then lastly, constant adoption and evolving, right? And maturing with the technology, because you can slice and dice the data. And you've been on our console, you know what it looks like. You can come up with as many variations as you want for these ones. These images don't have any protection. These ones have protection, but it's the protection that you used to use at endpoints 5 years ago. This is one that's up to date, but you're missing it on 150 devices, right? That stuff needs to be pulled to the front, and then you've got to do it site by site, which your point is right. No one, two looks the same. But then when you're done, how did you amalgamate it? What do I look like 18 months from now? And we need partners like you to take them on that journey. The technology is this small. The process people part is the big part.
Well, what have you witnessed more in regards to clients as they move towards an Armis solution? Are they relying to build their own internal practice, or are they relying on services and partners to help them get off the ground initially and maybe staying on that path because maybe their model is an outsourcing model? Maybe there's a hybrid, but in this particular space, what are you seeing as the majority of them moving to initially?
Unless you're in the Fortune, I'll even say 50 to 100, they may have one person.
That's what we witnessed. So maybe a couple at the most. And they got 100 plants in their fleet.
I can give you equal the size of our pals in St. Louis and that manufacturer that you just spoke of earlier, and equal the size and strength, but they don't have a quote unquote dedicated team like the traditional cyber team is. They're being pulled in, but there's only 1 or 2. For a global company that's $100, $200 billion company, you'd seen that team would might be slightly smaller. So right now, based upon the lack of maturity of, we can talk about this in a minute also, is the lack of resources that focus on this. There's a maturity of those resources. So even if we've been growing them, and I know we went through this when we were doing that at PwC, we were recruiting out of A&M and some of the local universities, particularly and across the country in general. But finding those individuals with the appropriate engineering background, with a comp sci background, that we can grow them into rock stars of their own and then take them into their own career paths and give them a viable job, right? The other thing too is how do we keep them entertained and viable in what they want to do long term for what they want to do with their career? So yes, right now, I would say you and I, like, we need you as much. We're in laying it down, but I see people coming in and doing resident engineers. We've talked about this. They almost need an additive human being to sit in their environment. They're willing to pay for a year to basically do what we just talked about. Ongoing, yeah, there's a couple of partners that want to dip into the managed service space. Not a lot. There's probably maybe less than 3 that I'm talking to right now, but they want to take it over.
Well, yeah. Well, just because we recognize what it takes to build that out, right? Mm-hmm. To your point, a Fortune 1000, you've got 50 plants in your fleet. Having one person assigned to this is not sufficient to do this right. I mean, we've witnessed these tools that have been deployed, they've been out there for 3, 4, 5 years, turning into shelfware, right? I mean, it's not uncommon for us to find that they haven't expanded the visibility. They haven't put in the right technology to get to the east-west traffic that's out there in their manufacturing facilities to really get a full understanding. And in my view, it's what we do as part of our practice is going out, not only putting the tool in, but touring the plant. And I don't mean a cursory review. I'm talking about opening up these panels, look at that ICS infrastructure and architecture and the networks that you have in there to determine how this machine is connected. What's it connected to, and what else is it connected to around it? So what's in this panel, what's outside this panel? And so we chase that down to really try to understand that. And in our business, that's of value to the OT organization because you're speaking their language. You show up wearing the uniform. They know you look like you belong there. You're speaking their language. And so as you're walking and touring through their plant, going through this, you're explaining to them why we're here, doing what we're doing, what these tools and solutions are. I was talking to a potential client a week or so ago, and you could tell the gentleman on the other end had obviously been on the job for 30 years, controls guy, and the first words out of his mouth were, "What are you going to put on my network?" That's the first thing he said. It is because even when I mentioned the tool sets, it's like, have you heard of any of these? He's like, not really. I would put him in the Fortune 1000, realm. And you have a guy who's running a very large food plant who is not even aware of this stuff. And so it's a challenge.
Thanks for tuning in to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider Podcast. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. And if you found this podcast helpful or have a topic you'd like us to cover, please leave us a review or let us know. If you're interested in learning more about Velta technology and how you can get safer sooner, visit veltatech.com. That's BELTA tech.com. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.